We were just a bunch of nerdy kids who ignored the haters. We took their ridicule and we built on it. And when some of us gave up, well, we built on that too. Built resilience, built on a mission to make things a little better every day until the users came. Then the haters were VCs who scoffed at our audacity. This just isn't the way things are done. But we kept building. Users turned into teams, turned into companies, running their entire businesses on our apps. Then the software giants came after us. We weren't proven, we weren't fully featured, our radical cloud model wasn't secure. But we built on. And today, as companies adopt the cloud to move faster, teams are finding themselves slowed down by each other's efforts. The skeptics are claiming we'll never develop innovation at scale. But now, DevOps have come to the cloud, ushering in a new era of transformation. Companies can release on demand across hundreds of environments, innovating faster with fewer conflicts and fewer disruptions. There will always be challenges. There will always be naysayers. And we'll build on.
Well, welcome to the session today. We're going to be talking about Marketing Cloud's NoCode Preference Center and preference centers in general. That's going to be our topic of choice for today, all about Preference Center, email communication, and Marketing Cloud. And so if you're new to Marketing Cloud, you'll learn a little bit about Marketing Cloud and communication today. If you're, you've been in Marketing Cloud for a while, hopefully you're going to learn something new, and I think this will be a good topic for you. So before we dig in, just wanted to do a little intro of myself. Shane Smythe. I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 7 years now. I started in Marketing Cloud actually, and since then have done Marketing Cloud, Pardot, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Heroku, Einstein Analytics, and several other platforms. And so I've kind of been across all the different spaces. My current role is a Salesforce and AI practice lead at a company called HandsOn Digital, which is a Salesforce consultancy. So I enjoy spending time reviewing a lot of these topics with everyone on the phone. So before we dive into the content here, I wanted everyone to think about the last time you unsubscribed from an email. So I'm just going to give everyone a second to think about that. Last time you went into your Gmail or whatever other else inbox you have and clicked the unsubscribe button. What was the reason you did that? So I'm going to guess a couple of the reasons out there are because the email communication wasn't relevant. It wasn't personalized to you. Maybe you didn't like the branding they had. Maybe the product that you bought from them sucked. Maybe they sent you too many emails, or maybe several other reasons too. But there's always a reason why you unsubscribe. So we're going to dig into this concept here. But first, let's start with the people in the room who are familiar with Marketing Cloud. So you're gonna recognize this from Marketing Cloud's native preference center. So we're gonna talk about what makes a good preference center, what makes a bad preference center, and just what it is in general as we get into the topic here. All right, so what is a preference center? From my point of view, a preference center it can do a lot of things. But there are three main things it has to do really well. Otherwise, it's not going to function as a good preference center. The first thing is that you need to be able to manage your own communication as a customer through this preference center. So you need to understand what you're getting and when I'm going to get it. Some general timelines of frequency. And the second one here is you're going to want to understand what channel you're receiving communication on. Is this an email? Is this a push notification? Is this a text message, or maybe another channel? You really want to understand that as a customer, because that will determine if I'm going to subscribe to the content you're going to send me or not. The last one is personalization. So I'm giving, as a customer, you my information so that you can make my life easier. At the end of the day, that's what the customer is actually doing. And there are many other reasons why you would do a preference center, or why you need a preference center. One of them is a legal compliance. In the United States and in European regions and Canada, it's required through legal law and several other places as well. But a preference center can be so much more than this too. So this is, to me, this is the way the customer can raise their virtual hand and say, this is what I want to receive, and this is how I want to receive it. So before we get into what makes a good preference center, let's talk a little bit about what not to do. Here again, we're inside of Marketing Cloud. Everyone is familiar that's been in Marketing Cloud with this screen. This preference center has been around for at least the 7 years that I've been a part of it, and I'm pretty sure it's been around since the exact target time, before Marketing Cloud. So there's a couple of things not to do when you think about a custom preference center in Marketing Cloud. Inconsistent branding is the first one. When a person is going to your preference center, they want to feel at home in your brand there. They want to be able to easily navigate to what they're trying to accomplish, and they want to be able to tell you what they want very quickly and easily. You want the ability for them to have a single unsubscribe, but also the ability to dive down into the individual subscriptions. So being able to modify my subscription. So instead of just giving them a single button saying opt out of all my communication, you can break it down and say, do you just want to receive the webinar series over here? Do you just want to receive updates about products? Do you just want to receive information over in this sector over here? So you can really allow that granular opting in of types of communication. So you don't want to just give one button, you want to give multiple. Another thing not to do is to provide too many. So this is almost like the Goldilocks of preference centers. Is you don't want to provide just one option, but you also don't want to provide over 10 in most cases, because then it gets overwhelming. I've seen preference centers with over 200 subscriptions in it. I kid you not, 200. It causes confusion for the customers, and they just end up opting all out because it's easier that way. You also don't want to show inconsistent data. So if you have one stored information about a customer's first name over here and they've updated that, but then you show it in the preference center as something different over here, it's going to be very disjointed for the customer. They're going to understand, does this company really actually know who I am, and do I trust my information with them? And there are several others as well of what not to do in preference centers. But as you're thinking about the preference center in Marketing Cloud, you can see that it's breaking a couple of those rules there, and it's been around for a bit now, and it gives you the kind of base level compliance. But as you're thinking about how do I make my preference center experience better for my actual customers, you start thinking about a custom preference center in Marketing Cloud. So what are the challenges of custom preference center, and what are the pros here? Let's talk a little bit about this. So a couple of the challenges of a custom preference center here is the upkeep and maintenance. So for those of you who have been inside of Marketing Cloud in the past and probably interacted with some level of a custom preference center, you understand that most of it is custom built. It's hard coded. It's something you have to manage and work with your development teams in order to keep up to date. You need to make sure that you're working with your IT teams. You need to have that ongoing compliance management. So you need to understand GDPR, CCPA, CASL, CAN-SPAM, all the legal requirements around managing a custom preference center. And you also need to be able to capture those opt-ins quickly and easily for your customers. You also need the ability to remap your subscriptions. So that's one of the challenges of a custom preference center is what is the right granular level of information to give to our end users so that they choose the right type of communication they want. And then you get into some more complicated scenarios if you're a bigger business where you have multiple business lines or multiple product lines, and you want to be able to show and visualize a preference center differently. Those are all pretty common challenges with the custom preference center. So one of the things that we've been working on through this process over the last, let's call it 5 to 6 years, is how do we make this process easier? Because we view a custom preference center as an actual way to drive better engagement with your consumers. So let me show you a graph here. So this is a pretty typical process for a preference center. So a person may go to a form, they may submit information, capture that information about a customer. That information goes into, let's call it Salesforce, a database of record. And at that point, the marketer kind of picks it up and they start sending these email communication right here to be able to send, drive traffic and drive sales for the customer if you're B2C or B2B. And then the person at some point, because they've received too many emails or they're not relevant, they may go to a preference center, and that may allow them to opt out completely, and then you've lost that individual. we feel like there's a better way in Marketing Cloud and with Preference Centers in general. And we kind of call it this Experience Center instead. So instead of waiting to the very end of the process, what we're thinking of is a form submission. The next thing you do is you drive them to this Experience Center. And then from there, you go to the database of record, you capture the information, and then you start sending the communication afterwards. And this is actually a much better way to allow your customers up front the ability to modify what they want to receive and how they want to receive it by you as the company. So throughout this process, we've been thinking, man, it's really hard to manage custom preference centers. We want to make it easier. And so recently we came out with a product called the NoCode Preference Center. And this NoCode Preference Center allows you to manage your subscriptions and your updates in seconds with no code, and allows the marketer the ability to make all these changes without the need to work with IT and to go through long development cycles in order to do this. So it's a lot quicker deployed. So I wanted to walk you through some of these thoughts here, and also dig a little bit into the demo as well. But one of the things that you want to keep in mind as you're thinking about Marketing Cloud and custom preference centers in Marketing Cloud, and even ours, for instance, is thinking about the data model. So how do I actually capture the information about my customer and build the single view of the customer? So here's an example of a single view of the customer. So on the left-hand side over here, we're going to have very typical information about our customer. We're going to have profile information, who they are, where they're from, what account they're a part of. We're going to have order information if we're a company that captures that type of information. You may also have cases if you have a product and they need to communicate back and forth with you. You're going to have all that information about who they are, potentially in Sales or Service Cloud and potentially somewhere else. But in a lot of cases, you don't have information outside of that from a subscription, and what is that person interested in and what type of communication they want to receive. So part of us building this package is stitching together the single view of the customer. So now with the NoCode Preference Center, you're able to stitch all this information together in a single view and be able to market to the person how and when they want to receive that. And when you're thinking about custom preference center, and any in general, you want to think about who benefits from this. So there's two sides of the coin here. There's the customer and there's the marketer. So on the customer side, like I've mentioned a couple of times, they want to have a seamless experience with their brand. They want the ability to manage how and when they actually receive their communication. On the marketer side, they want the ability to have a fully integrated end-to-end system that's a single view of the customer, and they also want to be able to do this quickly and easily to drive better ROI for their company. So those are some of the benefits and thought processes you want to have as you're thinking about custom preference centers in Marketing Cloud. So why don't we get into a little bit of hands-on demo here and show you guys what this looks like and what Marketing Cloud looks like. Okay. So first thing here is that I've mentioned a couple of times the NoCode Preference Center is a fully managed package. So this is deployed into the App Exchange. You guys are welcome to come here and type in the NoCode Preference Center and find it if you're interested. So let's actually get into Marketing Cloud for a second here. So this is Marketing Cloud. If for those of you on the phone who've never logged into Marketing Cloud before, it is completely different than Sales and Service Cloud. It's a different system altogether. But this is the interface that we use to manage who we're sending to and what we're sending to them. So an individual and the actual piece of email. If you remember the screenshot I showed you before, if we pull up the standard native preference center, it's going to look something like this, and have the ability to opt out and to manage your preference or your profile information. But that's about it. So why don't we show you a little bit about what the NoCode Preference Center actually allows you to do. So if I go into the Great Lakes Outdoors brand, this is one of our demo brands, just to kind of showcase some of the things we do as a consulting partner. This is actually built inside of the Salesforce ecosystem. So this app that we're talking about today is built in Heroku and Sales Cloud. and is able to be deployed into any company's instance to make managing preference centers a lot easier for the consumer. Our preference centers usually have 3 sections in it. It has the profile section at the top here. So that's all about who you are and where you came from and any of the fields you want. You're able to have single text fields, drop downs, and everything in between. And then we get down to the really important part here. So what are you interested in and what do you want to receive in your inbox? So we think of subscriptions as the actual piece of email that you receive in your inbox. So let's say that I've opted into hiking tips. I'm going to receive a weekly newsletter on hiking tips. And I have interests we view as kind of the ability to personalize. So it's what you receive in your email. So if I've opted into hiking tips and that weekly newsletter I mentioned, and I've also clicked on mountain climbing, I may receive in my hiking tips a more curated email that has content or tips about mountain climbing instead of rock climbing or some other subtopic inside of that category there. So we really use the 2 of these together to provide better segmentation and better personalization, and at the end of the day, better ROI for marketers. So you're probably thinking, wow, this looks great for Great Lakes Outdoors. This is probably pretty complicated to set up. It's actually not. So what I usually say when I come here is that the UI is the easy part. Everything you see on the screen is fully customizable through the UI, so you can change the fonts and colors and text and images and subscriptions very easily, and I'll show that here in a second. One more thing I wanted to just call out real quick is that as you're thinking about this for your brand, and depending on what company or area you're a part of, you're going to need to manage multiple business units and multiple languages. And so our preference center here is fully compliant across all those, and also allows you to quickly translate languages on the fly as you need to in your preference center. So why don't we go into a demo instance of our Sales Cloud org. Let me just get that up here. So the back end of this is a managed package in Sales Cloud. And so I've opened up our Great Lakes Outdoors brand. You can see that we're inside of our NoCode Preference Center app here. Everything is customizable through this app. So everything you see on this front-end UI is configurable inside of Sales Cloud as a marketer. Before we go into that though, let's look at Joshua. So if you were paying attention, we're Joshua Paulson in this case. If we come into Joshua Paulson, I can see all the typical information I would normally see about Joshua here. We have some extra capabilities inside of our package here by just being able to simply see the subscriptions and the clean and easy UI of what is this individual opted into, when did they opt into, and what are they not opted into, and be able to subscribe and unsubscribe them very quickly if you have that ability or permission inside of your company. But then there's also a compliance piece here too. I've mentioned a couple times, you need the ability to capture when and how and who subscribed into your subscriptions. So we capture a lot of this information behind the scenes to make it easier for you as marketers. So I've mentioned a couple of times that it's all customizable on the back end here. So if we go back to our preference center, we're going to see that we have 3 interests and 3 subscriptions here. Those are all going to be records inside of your managed package. So these are all things that you can easily come into and say, look, here's my hiking tips. I can come in here and I can make any modifications I want to from the subscription, and it will immediately change on the preference center. So now it's as simple as just making configuration changes instead of actually going in and deploying a new release and managing the full life cycle of a preference center if you need to make changes. So I can come in here and I can change the channel if I need to. I can activate or deactivate it so it doesn't show up, and I can also add as many languages as I want. So you can see we have hiking tips English in here, but we also have hiking tips in Spanish called out as well. So it's very easy to manage a lot of this through this UI here. A couple other things I'll mention as I go through this. Everything else that you see on the preference center, including your profile fields and your banner images and everything on top of this, is all also objects in here that you can manage very easily and quickly, including languages and business units to be able to have that capability if you need to. So let me just pop into our package configuration here. These are the records that kind of control the back-end framework of our app and what shows on the Preference Center. So you can see that we have font families and border radiuses and hex codes of buttons and text colors. So all the things that you would want to, as a marketer, be able to change very easily and quickly. So you'll notice as we've gone through this that in reality, this whole page is completely customizable. And so that's how our app works. We deploy it out to an instance, and then you are the one that decides on what you want it to look like. All right, so let's pause here for a little bit on the configuration of this. So how do we actually use this as a marketer? And what's the value of capturing Preference Center preferences and subscriptions in the right way as a marketer inside of Marketing Cloud? At the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to send an email to the right person at the right time with the right content. And so that's what we're aiming to do. And also, what we've talked about at this point, all this information that flows back into Sales Cloud or Service Cloud also flows into Marketing Cloud, or if you're just using Marketing Cloud, straight into Marketing Cloud. And you use this a couple different ways. You use this for your actual email sending. So all this information gets synced into data extensions through your integration here. And then you're able to easily create a filter and say, I want to be able to send to the Analytic Champion Fireside subscription that I have and through filters. So now instead of having to do complicated queries to find the right people and try to find who's opted in and opted out, it's as easy as just saying, I want to send to this specific audience that are opted in, and then finding those people and being able to use the information you have about them to send the targeted communication to, in this case, the 13 people. And then on top of that, you also are building your email communication. So you're building your emails around what type of content a person may like inside of that audience. You would be able to use your interests that were captured here to be able to identify who's interested in mountain climbing or fishing or boating or whatever your company may be, to really drive that personalization very quickly and easily. Okay, so let's just go back to our slide here. So let me back up one slide. So that's what we're really trying to drive when it comes to custom preference centers. We really want to be able to provide that that experience as a marketer to our customers that provides a better experience for them. So with that being said, I'm going to pause, and I see a couple of questions coming in through Q&A. So keep them coming in and we'll go through these and answer a few of them right now. Okay, so I'm just seeing one right here about, so while we implement a preference center, do you need to develop and train a process for all internal users to identify what bucket they're sending to from? So a customer will then be able to properly identify the type of communication they receive before they unsubscribe from a particular bucket. Yeah, that's a great question. So as we're going through this, this process, part of doing a custom preference center in any company is identifying what subscriptions, and part of that is training your marketers on what buckets have what emails associated to it. So that I mentioned earlier, the kind of the Goldilocks zone of subscriptions and preferences. You don't want too many, but you don't want too little. And so it's really finding that medium and then getting your team to kind of globally buy off on that. All right, so there's a question about how do I get hands-on and learn Marketing Cloud if our company doesn't own it yet? That is a great question. Unfortunately, this is not as easy as Sales Cloud or any of the other products that Salesforce has. We can just spin up a dev org. Marketing Cloud does not yet have a concept of a free developer account. So if you're interested on learning more about Marketing Cloud, you can either purchase it, work with a partner of Salesforce to get some demos of it. There's some good content out there to learn more. So Trailhead has some content. I have a YouTube video or YouTube series that walks you through kind of the basics and gives you some ideas of how to use Marketing Cloud. It's called Marketing Cloud Mojo. And you can also go to a couple of sites like Pluralsight that has some good courses on Marketing Cloud as well. So there's a question about, is this something that can be used for Pardot? Great question. I really focused in on Marketing Cloud for this, but the preference center that I had mentioned can be used for either Marketing Cloud or Pardot. So yes, it can. So there was a question about installing this for in a free instance to kind of get a trial of how it actually is set up. Absolutely, we can definitely work with you on figuring something out like that. So just reach out to me after the session here. All right, so if you need to add a new category, how do you handle that? Do you subscribe your customers to them to let them know that there's a new category or some other scenario? All right, so good question. Let me just jump back into the demo mode here. So if I were to add a new category, it's simply just going into categories and saying I want to, it's not import, I want a new category. And you would fill out the information. It's going to be a new category in the subscription. Here's what the display text is going to say. Here's what business unit's associated to, and here's the order I want it to show up on a page. And then you have to add a couple of extra fields after you save it. But it really is that easy. You can probably spin up a new category in about 5 minutes. There's an underlying question here though about once I add that new category or that new subscription, how do I actually let my customers know about it? So it depends on your company's policy. Some companies' policy is if I'm starting a new subscription and they have this X subscription already opted into, they'll automatically get enrolled. Some other companies' perspective is that they need to explicitly opt in each time a new subscription is created. And so you would work with your marketing team to actually send out communications to your customers and say, would you also be interested in this type of content? Or if you have a policy that's different, you would work through that with your company. All right, good question about if this could work with the customer community. Absolutely. So this is a Heroku page that is going to be visible to everyone because that is part of the legal law that you need to comply to for the different regions. But if you wanted to be able to embed a component or two of this into a customer community, you absolutely could because it is part of your Sales Cloud instance. That's very easy to do. All right, another question about Pardot. We already talked about that. Okay, so there's a question about how do I synchronize the custom preference center from Sales Cloud to Marketing Cloud? Is this package using Marketing Cloud Connect? Great question. So yes, our package does use the standard Marketing Cloud connector using synchronized data extensions to pull that information over to Marketing Cloud. We also have additional integration from our package into Marketing Cloud through the API. So one of the things we wanted to be able to manage was the global unsubscribe through the all subscribers table. And so when you come in here and if I were to click unsubscribe all, that will actually communicate directly with Marketing Cloud via the connector. So there is some enhanced integration like that we enable through our package. All right, so if you show the customer an experience center when they initially opt in, would you expect to see better engagement? Is there a trade-off with making the sign-up process friction-free with a single click? That is a great question. And so just to be super clear on what I was trying to explain here, it's a little bit disjointed in this picture here, so I probably need to make a modification, but the form would essentially stay the same. That would not change. They would be able to opt in right away. And what we're saying here is that at this point, they'd either have the option to, the pop-up module would pop up and say, would you like to curate more of your preferences or subscriptions? And they can opt in and out of that. They're not required to, but at least they have that option at that point. Or it could redirect them to another page, which would be the Experience Center. And the idea here would be to have a more curated walkthrough. So the page wouldn't necessarily look exactly like this. It would be more of a step-by-step process of, great, you've opted into this subscription. You might also be interested into this topic over here, or you may be interested in learning more about this, and they can opt in and out as they see fit. So it's the combination of keeping it friction-free. So really after this, you're still saving your information, but it gives them that ability to kind of curate more if they need to. So there's a question about wanting to understand how to add this package to the Salesforce Marketing Cloud account. Yeah, so if you're interested in adding this to your account, you can work with us afterwards. I'll put my information back up here so that you guys can reach out to me through LinkedIn or Twitter if you guys are interested. But it is a package that is publicly available right now. All right, there's a question about Is all this information synced with Sales Cloud? How often? Great question. So our front-end UI here is, like as I mentioned before, built in an enterprise Heroku instance. We use Salesforce's technology, Heroku Connect, to synchronize information between your instance and your front end here in a matter of a second or less. So it is very quick, and this enables you to make changes on the Sales Cloud side and also customers on the front end side without any conflict. There's a question about, can this be installed across multiple business units in a single account? Yes, it can. It depends on where your information is stored and also if you're using multi-connect, which in Marketing Cloud allows you to have your business unit hooked into a separate Sales Cloud environment. So it would really depend on how you have your setup configured. All right, so there's a question about, for those of you who are maybe looking for a free option in Marketing Cloud instead of using a package like this, absolutely. I've been building custom preference centers for years now. So if you're interested in doing something less managed like this and kind of a stepping stone to get to this point, you have the option to build a custom preference center in Marketing Cloud that, from a cost perspective, would only take time and material to build. So either you can do that internally or you can hire someone externally to do that. If you don't want to use the default preference center and you want something more than that, but not necessarily you're at the point where you want to do something like this, you would do a custom preference center using Cloud Pages, and you would build that functionality into your Marketing Cloud instance. That is an option. There's a question about if partners have the ability to get hands-on with Marketing Cloud. Yes, you do. You'd have to work with your PAM in order to get an account, but you can work with them in order to get a new account. All right, so there's a question about, is it possible to maintain some of the attributes only in child business units instead of parent business units? So yeah, it's definitely possible. It's just a matter of how you sync the information in Marketing Cloud, but it would really depend on the specifics of your implementation. All right, there is a few really long questions in here. If you would like to dig a little bit more into this, feel free to direct message me through these two channels over here. I think for those bigger ones, that's the best way to handle this. All right, so there's a couple questions about where do I learn more? So as I mentioned, there's an app exchange right here. There's also a link that you can come to, e.horizontal.com/ncpc, and you can learn a little bit more about our product and functionality down here below. So there's a question about using the API to keep a preference center in sync can be a lot to maintain. So yeah, depending on your instance, if you're building something from scratch, if you weren't to buy something managed and you were to want to endeavor on this by yourself, it's a pretty big undertaking, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to build a easy to deploy system like this that can integrate very quickly and easily. But it does take some work, and that's one of the reasons why we built it on Heroku to be really close to the Salesforce environment. So there's a question about how do I get reports on unsubscribed customers? So in our packages, a few different ways you can get at this. You can look into it from a Marketing Cloud perspective and see that all in your normal Marketing Cloud reports. But you can also go into reports, and there's a few out-of-the-box reports that we provide as part of our package. And so you can easily come to this report and say who's currently opted in to what subscriptions, or you can also say, filter down to people who have opted out or opted in to get a more refined reporting. All right, and I think that is the end of our questions here. So great questions, everyone. I really appreciate the time to kind of go over this with you, and hopefully you guys learned a little something about preference centers in general and the do's and the don'ts of preference centers, but also how do you move forward into a better customer-centric preference center idea here.